In a world filled with conflict, in a universe comprised of differences, there's one thing that absolutely everything shares in common. We all exist. Including two guys named Jack and Michael, who like to chat about that very thing over a good cup of coffee. Let's pay them a visit, shall we?
Existence Brewing.
There's like no one in here today at all. This is weird. Was there a notice on the door about the place from the health department? Something like that?
Isn't it the worst? When your favorite place scores poorly. I don't know that I've ever experienced that, though. We live in a pretty small town, and I feel like most of the restaurants around here have a fairly good record.
So social media, of course, is just, I'm aghast with social media because it brings out the absolute worst in people. And usually what I detest the most about people too, which is their inability to form coherent and comprehensive sentences, either with words or in video. Like, well,
why did
language.
You choose to do a podcast with me then?
So there's this site that we check in with. My girlfriend introduced it to me. We check in with it at work for news purposes because it's supposed to be a thing where people put what's going on in the area, like crimes and things, but it also winds up being all this other shit too. So was just on there, just doing a daily perusal for professional purposes only, because I do not get sucked into those. Sometimes I glance at it and I'm just like, oh my God,
the trolls.
My day is worse for having looked at what some people are actually doing with their lives.
Yeah.
Who am I to judge? But I guess I'm here, so I can judge, and I will. But there was this, it's like our favorite restaurant here. It's like where we had one of our first dates, and somebody was flaming it because they said, I noticed that they were from out of state though. They said they went in there, ordered something. It wasn't right. It wasn't what they ordered. And it was apparently it was a meat dish that had no meat. And so they lodged a, general grievance with the waitress in a kind manner, they said. And the waitress said, yes, you're right. This is wrong. It's not what you ordered, and it should have meat. And so she agreed to either amend it or take it off their bill, or both. And then a few minutes later, the cook, so she says, comes storming out and makes a big scene and says, you have no right to just demand your money back. And we work hard back there. And who the hell are you? And no, you're not getting this. You can't just walk into a restaurant. This isn't fast food. You can't just walk in and order something and say it's not right and then not pay for it. I'm just thinking, well, if it were fast food, you'd probably have an easier time doing that, actually. But okay.
Yeah, really.
So, but apparently she had a picture of the guy who purportedly he followed them into the parking lot when they left. And like in his little, those clear things that you pull over your shoes in the kitchen so you don't.
Yeah, the little booties.
Yeah, the little booty. He was in his little booties out there in the parking lot and everything, like filming them as they left. And she said, I was just, thought, what in the world is going on? This was a horrible experience, and we left and we'll never go back. And I happened to notice that she was from like 2 states away. But
yeah,
it was one of those things where several of the comments underneath were like, I have a feeling there's more to the story than this. But maybe they were just bashing her for not being a regular on the site. But yeah, it is tough when one of your favorite places actually takes a walloping from.
Yeah. And I also find Yelp an interesting website or app or whatever you want to call it, because when you're going on vacation, it's a great way to find out which restaurants are good, or if you're unfamiliar with an area. But it's also funny to read some of the reviews from people who clearly aren't locals. And when they go to some of the places in this town and their experiences at some of the restaurants, I'm actually really surprised, though, at the reviews. And I think that in a small town, it's even harder to have a restaurant because you have kind of you have a smaller pool, and so you kind of have to up your game in this small town because people are going to go to the same ones over and over and over and over again. There's not the variety that you have maybe in a bigger city. So, I really do feel like, for the most part, some of the restaurants we have around here, the pho place, the sushi places, what's your favorite restaurant? We don't have to name a name, but
we actually have good Asian food for a town.
We do.
Of our size. The Vietnamese place is fantastic. We have one really great Thai place. That's the one I was referencing that this woman apparently had the experience at, so she says. But it's not going to deter us from going back. I just hope we never have to put up with that.
What, the tourists or the man with the booties?
No, the guy. The booty clad kitchen, the cook who came out and was yelling at them and said, you can't just not pay for something because it's not what you order. It's just like, well, yeah, actually, I think you're supposed to be able to do that. I think the problem arises when the food comes. See, I'd like to have a sit down with this guy so I could just say, ordering it, looking at it and going, this isn't right. It needs to either be amended or we're taking it off the bill. We're not paying for this. That's allowed. I think any cop or any judge, not that it would ever get that far, but is going to agree with, right, if this isn't what you ordered, you shouldn't have to pay for it. The problem arises when the meal comes and you ingest all of it, and then you say, that wasn't what I expected. That's the problem. So usually that's the litmus for whether it qualifies for a refund or not, is have you eaten it and how much of it have you eaten? If you've only taken a few bites to discover like human fecal matter or fingernails or used Band-Aids or something in it, then that's okay. It's like, I made this discovery. And even then you could probably get 9/10 of the way through it. And if you found a cockroach or something, then you probably still have a case. But so I don't know anyway, but yes, we have some good Asian places here. The thing with the small town, like the really small town, I'm sure that happens here, but I don't think it adversely affects business as much as in really small communities where it becomes more just partisan Jerry Springer nightmare bullshit. Like, it has nothing to do with the food, why I won't eat there. It's because Martha, when she put out her nativity scene last year, she straddled baby Jesus on the back of one of the goats, and that was about as sacrilegious as a person can do. So I'm never going to her restaurant. We don't speak anymore. It's that bullshit. But you don't have any idea as an outsider. You're coming into this Hatfields and McCoys over the plastic baby Jesus in her nativity scene. And
it sounds like you worked at that radio station once upon a time. Yeah, I have a community.
At all those radio stations.
I have a community in mind near here, and I think you do too. And, it is funny because I was actually recalling the other day when I was a member of the community, and I would receive phone calls all the time about what our morning show man said that particular day. And there was one time that this man was so irate with me, and he was a local business owner. And he just had this entitlement that I needed to really hear his concerns, and I was happy to hear his concerns. I just didn't understand why it was a concern. And I want to say that the morning show man said something like, batten down the hatches. It's going to be snowy today. And, it was one of those things that I don't even know that he realized it was a tick for him. And he just kept kind of going back to it. He would just say, batten down the hatches. It's going to be rainy, and whatever. And so then I got a call from this is how far it went. I first got a call from the director of the Chamber of Commerce. And they said, you should probably address this with this local business owner. He's very upset that you guys have been giving the weather in the way that you've been giving it on the air. And they told me the story, and I said, okay, well, I don't understand why that's a problem. Well, maybe you need to talk to this person because he has a real problem with it. Oh, okay. So I called him. He owns a local hat store. And this isn't like a fine Stetson hat. This is like a
trucker's cap, mesh, with the old Tampa Bay Buccaneers logo on it, the creamsicle one, not the new one.
Oh, this is like a yodeler's dream store.
Okay, so it's
right. It's one of those, I mean, they run the gamut from, I'm sure, the trucker hats to the fantasy hats and everything in between. And if you can read this hat, put me back up on my bar stool and whatever. So I talked to the man, and the reason he was upset was because the local Chamber of Commerce, which he happened to sit on the board of, just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on an ad campaign. And now the local radio station was saying, batten down the hatches, it's going to be snowy. And I said, well, let me ask you this, sir. And I said this as straight-faced as I possibly can. How many listeners do you think we have?
Yeah. I don't know the entire history of the term batten down the hatches, but I'm pretty sure that it would apply to blustery weather, i.e. weather when there was going to be windy or breezy even conditions present, because it's an old sailor's term, I'm pretty sure, about battening down, making sure that all of the hatches on the ship. So if you're saying it when it's going to snow or rain, it's not necessarily applicable as it is, but still, why get upset over that? So the hat store guy, I was thinking you were going to tell me that it was because the hats were going to blow off, and that would be bad for business.
No, it had something to do with this ad campaign. It was the dumbest ad campaign I had ever seen, and it was involving a nutcracker and these scantily dressed women. And I mean, it was.
I've seen that porno.
Oh yeah, it was bad.
I think it's actually called the Nutcracker. Sweet.
Yeah, no, I think it was called Woody Goomsbaugh.
Oh no, don't bring that up. Don't.
Yeah, but we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on frickin' Woody Goomsbaugh.
You got ripped off. I hated that ad campaign.
I just started. I couldn't help myself. I just was like, this guy is serious.
Yeah, and the people that did it were local too, and they have massive egos. They think that
and I'm sorry, sir, that you spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on Woody Goomsbaugh, but that's not my problem.
Well, there's an old saying in the broadcast business, and we'll just pass it along to all the kiddos that actually might want to be even podcasters, although I'm sure they're probably aware of this already in their young lives. But there is someone waiting around every corner to be offended, meaning you do not even have to try to offend anyone, and you are going to do it every single day of the week that you're on the air. So just get used to it, because that's what some people sit on the other end of the radio to do, is be offended. What do you think the old thing about Howard Stern was all about? The average person who likes Howard Stern listens half an hour a day. The average person who hates his freaking guts and wants him to die a horrible death listens 3.5 hours, because they're already rotten and miserable, so they want to be more rotten and miserable and project even more animus at the radio. And that's the sell of the show for half the people out there.
Yeah, kids.
Crazy.
Just keep that in mind the next time you choose to set your sights high and somebody who owns a hat store decides to rain on your parade.
Could we talk a little bit about Willie Nelson for just a second, too? What the hell is with mamas don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys? I mean, isn't it time to, first of all, when was it ever like a bad idea to let a child wrangle cows for a living? First of all, no one does it. Like, no one's going to be a cowboy. You sort of just fall into that, don't you? Like, you don't actually say, I'm going to be a cowboy. It just kind of happens, right? Suddenly you're an outlaw. One day you're find yourself on a white horse striding to the bank, and there's some hooligans that are in the back in the dumpster and they need some help. And the next thing you know, you're a fucking cowboy. It's just like nobody like grows up to be a cowboy. It's sort of, you fall into it, or it comes down the family tree. So I think it's about time we change that. I think Willie should come back, especially now that we have recent goings on to back this up. And I know you're not all going to like this, but how about mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be CEOs of major healthcare corporations or heads of major insurance companies, or, isn't that a better fit for us in this day and age?
Hey, moms, don't let your kids grow up to own hat stores.
Don't let your babies grow up to be Woody Goomsba. Or actually, probably better yet, hey, moms, be sure and keep your kids away from Woody Goomsba, because you know what he'll do with them.
Don't let your babies be one of the girls dancing in the Woody Goomsba video.
By the way, this is so backwoods, like Mayberry garbage, this Woody Goomsba thing. Nobody has any idea what we're talking about. You could look it up and find traces of it online, I'm sure, but it's a talking nutcracker. That's the whole thing. It's literally nothing more than a talking nutcracker with a seemingly clever name that probably someone just said accidentally when they were wasted.
I don't even think it
spoke. We're talking about.
I don't even think there was any dialogue.
The mouth like went up and down. So
yeah, I think it just had like expressions. Like it was like a mime. Like it would just be like, whoa.
Nutcrackers do all have that expression, like their nuts are getting cracked too.
They do, don't they?
At least they're aptly named in that compartment.
It's kind of a bizarre expression, isn't it?
Maybe they should have done like a Matryoshka doll that unpacked the 5 stages of grief when you're over advertised too. You know what I mean? Like just those Matryoshka nesting dolls they have, where it's just like the outside starts with eager anticipation, and then the next one is like, oh, I'm not sure about this, and then the next one is downright fear, and then the next one is loathing and self-doubt, and then the last one is just literal like suicidal anger, like it's just homicidal anger. It's like, yes, this is our new ad campaign doll. It's gonna peel the layers off what's going to happen to the person after they've heard this fucking commercial enough times.
I like it.
Yeah, I'm sure that little realism in advertising. The problem is that, like Bill Hicks used to say, when he would come on stage and do this, it was a joke. And of course, if you were in his camp, which I think he never depended on, but he had his devout, he had his devotees like we all do. But he would come on stage, and at one point he'd say, is there anybody here in advertising or insurance tonight? A few hands would go up, of course, because people make a living, right? And he'd say, oh, great, that's wonderful, glad you're here. Look, do us all a favor tonight. When you go home, kill yourself. And people would kind of laugh, and he'd say, no, I'm totally serious. Do the world a favor, kill yourself. And then he would go into this thing where he'd say, oh, all of my sponsors right now, or all the people that are my handlers, are saying, oh, Bill's very clever. He's going for the whole anti-government. He's going for the whole anti-insurance route to try and sell. Like, no, I'm not. I'm being completely serious. And so, but he would constantly say that this was some sort of a ruse, a disguise for some marketing campaign. It was some structured, and it was like, no, he's totally serious. Of course, he wasn't totally serious. I don't think he wanted anybody to actually commit suicide because of what they did for a living, but he was trying to make a statement about how badly these people should feel for being in that like wing of employment. So it's the same thing they'd say to us if we were to pitch the 5 stages of grief Matryoshka nesting doll advertising campaign. They'd say, oh, you guys are going for some thing.
Isn't that kind of a David Thoreau thing? I recently have started to get into classic literature, and I think we talked a little bit about the Gray books, and I picked up a really good copy of a collection of the used copy of the Gray books, and there was another. There's a series that I would like to talk at some point in the future, David Thoreau. And he says something very similar about that, in the sense that, he was a big minimalist, and he strongly believed that we needed to renounce, kind of excess in our lives, and even to the point where anybody who is doing something as a vocation really should feel like it is not only fulfilling them, but also filling, a common man as well. And if they didn't feel like it was something that did either of those things, then they should denounce it and they should move on to something else. And anyway, it was kind of something that made me think of that, because that is somebody who I've started reading the piece of literature on Walden Pond. And there's a lot of really interesting ideas that I'd like to actually save for a future episode. And he was a really big philosopher. I didn't realize that David Thoreau was really, it wasn't just that he wrote poetry. He wrote some heavy things and some ideas that really, I think, can change people's lives.
I think most classic Baudelaires and writers alike sort of always had to be philosophers, or at least the really well-known ones always had a philosophical bent, because there was always an allegory sitting there. There was always something to teach us, and the stories that they would tell would typically play these out to try to lead us toward whatever lesson that was. It's interesting this should come up, because I was just glancing at this little download that I had from some time ago, and I wasn't quite sure whether I agreed with it or not. And so I was thinking maybe I won't use that one, but it came to me. And so this just came up, so I will. Now, I'll preface this by saying that I truly believe that no matter how despicable a person may be, or how wretched a life form might be considered, i.e. a virus that kills millions of people when it moves through a society, or mosquitoes, or what, everything that's here to me has a right to be here. It is here for a reason, even if that reason is to thin the herd a little bit, like viruses do. Look, if you're a virus, you need to move from one biological entity to another in order to survive and be a virus. And so it's just like we do with chopping down trees to wipe our ass and sit underneath when we build our homes. We're killing things in order to, in this case, actually survive and also be comfortable. So we've taken it to a different level. The virus doesn't wear a Gucci shawl the last time I knew. The virus just hops around and says, I want to keep being a virus for as long as I can. So again, I'll preface this by saying that I truly do believe the fundamental value, or the fundamental philosophy or belief, I guess, that all things that are here, no matter how awful they might seem, have a right to be here. They are here, and we need to accept that they are here, whether we want to fight against them or not. Because when it comes to viruses, we try, because we'd like to keep our own existence in this form brewing for a little bit longer. But I wrote this down, and it must have been one of those days where I was feeling especially misanthropic, I suppose. But it says, I judge most everyone by answering one question about them. Does the world need this person? If you answer no, then what are we to do with them? And then parenthetically, I have talk about being the example and showing the way. And, again, I don't think that's fair, because it's always going to be subjective, whether it comes from me or you or the reverend down the block or the neo-Nazi skinhead that lives across town. It doesn't matter who it comes from. Everybody's going to have a different answer to what is the world doing with this person? Should they be here? What purpose or service are they giving us while they're here? Does the world need this person? And I think I must have asked myself that when I saw someone that would classically, draw my odium, like somebody probably that was rolling coal in an old jacked up white pickup truck with a bunch of stickers on it with pictures of assault rifles and dead animals and, stuff like that. That's going to draw my particular disgust, because it seems to stand for a lot of things that I'm against. But at the same time, I'm not one to judge, what is the world doing with this person? Does it need them? But at the same time, I do think it begs the question, like I said parenthetically in my thought and my download. And the first thing you do is turn this inward, of course, and say, what am I doing for the world? Mm-hmm. What am I consciously trying to do for the world, before you turn it outward and starting judging other people? But it started with God, does the world really need this person? They just seem to be fucking up. They just seem to be making a lot of trouble for a lot of other people. And it's all that they really want to do. Now, I'm sure they may be serving a purpose if they're a father or a son with a mom or dad that's still alive and they're loved, or, then obviously, yes, everybody fulfills some kind of function. But I thought it was a great starting point for self-exploration first, to say, what are you doing to really, in your own mind, be needed by the world?
Mm-hmm.
Would people look at you and say, yeah, the world really needs Jack Hansen. He's doing a hell of a lot of good because he's making people, or he's helping people blank, do whatever, fill it in. I would like to think there'd be enough people that would sign that petition to say, okay, I'm safe. But if you're not living up to that expectation, and you really are just kind of, because there are a lot of people, let's face it, Michael, they go around and they cause problems. They just seem to just be muckrakers. They just like to stir things up for the sake of doing it. And I think these people don't have their eyes on the right prize. I think they're not introspective enough. I don't think they're looking at, hey, I could do better than this. Why do I want the world to be so angry at me all the time when they could be happy with the results of my actions and my words every day? You're never going to make everybody happy, and that's not the point. The point is to do a little bit better than doing so much bad that you would have somebody even as negative and judgmental as me look at you and say, does the world really need this person? I don't know. It was just a thought. And like I said, I didn't really like it when I first read it, but it sort of got brought up just now, so I thought I'd share.
Well, and I don't want the audience to get the wrong impression of Jack Hansen, because I really like Jack Hansen. And one of the things that I've kind of discovered about Jack Hansen as a personality is that he's not necessarily as concerned with, this bad thing or that bad thing, or this concept versus that concept, as much as, he's also really kind of, I think, concerned more with the individual and really the thought that the individual puts behind their ideals, as much as he is with the ideals of that individual, and I think that, like, there's not a lot of people out there who think about things the same way that Jack Hansen does. And I think that's the thing that I like the most about you. But, the coal rolling and the things like that, I think it really kind of comes back to, like, what is that person's position in society? And what is it that they're contributing to society? And how is it that they're viewing, I guess, not just themselves, but other people in that context? You know what I mean?
Well, I feel like, and the reason rolling coal, which, by the way, in case people don't know the term, you've all seen it. You've probably all heard of it. It's these guys, and let's face it, they're all guys. I've never seen a woman at the helm of one. They're probably out there,
sure
the coal rolling chicks. I'm sure there's a few, but it's always been men. And they think
they have modified mufflers.
They have modified mufflers, and they think it's nifty for them to literally effuse as much soot as possible into the immediate atmosphere. Apparently, I don't know why. The thing is, it's such an old gag. It's literally like Three Stooges, Bugs Bunny cartoons from the 40s stuff, right? When you'd see the bus exhaust come out and there'd be like black soot all over Elmer Fudd's face or something, and then Bugs would deliver the snarky line before he hopped away and got away from. So to me, it's so ridiculous, and antiquated. But to me, what it is. And I remember talking about it on a talk show that I had years ago on the conservative radio station that I worked for. Well,
how did that go over?
And I was airing my thoughts about it. I was saying, look, if you roll coal, this is, and I'm sorry, the guy was a dumbass. Some dumbass calls me up and says, actually, I heard that those things that do that are actually better for the environment than regular exhaust. I'm just like, sir, I'd like you to stop for just a moment and think about what you just said.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, I'm not exactly sure where you heard that.
I'm pretty sure the
but
fossils that you inconvenienced think otherwise.
think just a tiny bit about that.
Yeah.
You're saying that a whole lot of botulism is actually better than just a little bit getting into my asparagus. You're an idiot, okay? I'm sorry.
Right.
There's no other way for me to put it. You're a moron walking around, and I think what you're trying to do is believe something so that something that you absolutely know is repugnant beyond reproach is actually more acceptable because you happen to personally identify with some of the social outfitting that surrounds this phenomenon of rolling coal at
and
people.
What does that individual, I would love to actually, we talked about guests on this show. I mean, like, what does that individual contribute to society?
Well, I think it's supposed to be a snub at environmentalism. That's the best I've been able to come up with, is that basically, because let's face it, we do have a divide in this country, and the political divide tends to sort people out on one side of each issue or the other. So even things, sadly,
which is their plan. That's their plan.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, so the political divide is designed to be a rive. It's designed to create a fissure between people.
Right.
And it's not designed to create any solutions because the idea is to divide and conquer. And we've certainly been conquered mentally and emotionally. And
we've conquered
they've gone
each
after
other
us spiritually now. Yeah. So, and we've done it to each other. So the best I can figure is these people who decide I'm going to spend my hard-earned money on a modified muffler to blow some soot into the atmosphere, is I'm going to make a statement that says all of this crazy left-wing environmentalism is a ridiculous heap of poo-poo, and this is how I'm going to show my protest. And yet the thing is that would be fine if you actually breathed different air than everyone else, regardless of their persuasions in any particular way, regardless of what their particular theological perspective is or their political perspective. We all see, that's the whole point. That's the whole lesson at the end of the day under all of this, is we all share this world together. We all share this experience. And so we're going to have to figure out a way to look at the really important stuff and leave all the other bullshit behind. Because, it is kind of getting down the home stretch here. We're in some trouble. There's no question, and we know it. But I think we're kind of running in circles about what to do. And a lot of us are doing a little bit and feeling like, well, that's enough, and it's not. And then some of us feel like we're doing a whole lot, and we're really not doing much at all. And then there are a lot of people who I think just don't care. They're just immersed in the whole westernized human experience. And, well, take this, for example, today. This is just, this kind of associated enough, I think. So I'm looking for a gallery to attach to a story. We have local firefighters that are going to battle the wildfires that are burning around Los Angeles as we record this podcast. And so that's a nice local story for us. Obviously, people want to get behind the men and women who are risking their lives to go down and battle these wildfires and, that whole business. So I'm looking around. We're supposed to attach a gallery to the end of our stories. And there's a big surplus of galleries that's in our library that we can go search. So I go searching for wildfire. And by the way, it's a terrible algorithm. The search never comes up with much. It's difficult to navigate. It's clunky. Anyway, I search wildfire. And to my shock, sadly not amazement, I suppose, and definitely to my disgust, the only gallery that pops up that anyone has done in the past 3 or 4 days regarding the LA wildfires is rappers weigh in, rappers, R-A-P-P-E-R-S, rappers, as in, rappers weigh in, give their thoughts on LA wildfires. By the way, the guy who I work with used to write for the publication, for the company, for the particular entity that's now owned by the company that I work for. He used to work for them writing about rap music. So he knew every single one of the guys that was in there quoted. They all live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, folks.
Of course.
They all live all the way across the country. So a whole gallery devoted to the thoughts of rap artists about the LA wildfires when I'm looking for a little bit of meat on the bone.
Yeah.
Pictures, at least, of the fire. Neighborhoods that are no longer famous people who've been displaced by whatever. Fine.
Yeah. It reminded me of this moment here. Dave Chappelle, and here, let's listen in.
But I'm like, for real, why you care so much what the Dixie Chicks say? It's not like they political scientists and nothing. They just bitches that can sing good. You know what I mean? Stop worshiping celebrities so much. Just don't listen, pay attention. I remember right around September 11th, Ja Rule was on MTV. That's what they said. They said, we got Ja Rule on the phone. Let's see what Ja's thoughts are on this tragedy. Who gives a fuck what Ja Rule thinks at a time like this, nigga? This is ridiculous. I don't want to dance. I'm scared to death. I want some answers that Ja Rule might not have right now. I think when bad shit happens to me, I'll be in the crib like, oh my God, this is terrible. Could somebody please find Ja Rule, get hold of this motherfucker so I can make sense of all this. Where is Ja?
Of course I have no clue who he's even talking about. I've never heard of Ja Rule.
Ja Rule.
It must be Ja Rule. See, there you go.
Ja Rule was a rapper, and
I have no idea.
It was just hilarious when you said rappers, and it made me think of the Dave Chappelle. Can we get Ja on the phone?
Yeah, and it's not taking aim at rappers or famous rap musicians. If I don't even call them famous rap, like, I don't consider.
No, it's the association of events.
It's how we've lost our minds. It's just, to me, it's just like, is that really apropos? I mean, at a time like this, why? First of all, their thoughts should probably be consistent with every single other human being's thoughts on the planet, which is, oh my God, how terrible. I mean, we never like to see things burn down, no matter how giant the houses in the neighborhood might be, or, I don't know, whatever, pick your reason to want something bad to happen to a neighborhood. I don't think any of us can disagree that what's happening in Los Angeles is tragic because there's wildfires. Are there reasons why it happens? Now, of course, the finger pointing has started. We're into that game where, it's the mayor's fault, and then it's the last mayor's fault because they didn't put things in place that the former mayor had or didn't have.
It's always somebody's fault, right?
Oh, everybody said we love a fall guy, and Lee Majors is not around anymore, so we love to have a fall guy. It's just
we're a scapegoat.
We have to have our people that we blame for why something bad happens, and then we can move on. What I think to myself is this: once again, we're talking about, because on the heels of the story this morning, where I was hearing that they don't have enough firefighters, and that they just laid a bunch of them off last year. I'm not thinking about, well, why'd the mayor do that? Or, it's really, somebody's fault for firing these people or not retaining them or doing whatever. The story that I get on the heels of that is about pro football. As always, it's about the playoffs are here. And I'm thinking to myself, so if we took, I don't know, even just the offensive line and packaged up how much they make in a year, what do you think? How many firefighters could we afford to have? And I know that the two things aren't related, technically, financially. No cards and letters about, you do realize that the, county of Los Angeles doesn't pay the, LA Rams to play football. I get it. It's a private enterprise. The idea, though, is that it's what we value. Again, it goes back to what we value. We've done this episode several times. So that's the first place my mind goes. And then the second it goes in a larger camp, governmentally speaking, is, well, gee, how much money did we spend on all those nuclear weapons that we're still sitting on that we've just never found a reason to get pissed off enough at anybody around the world to go boom again with for the last 80 years? How much would one of those, what kind of a system could we build with the money that probably it took to just construct even half of those, that would be some kind of a giant water thing or some kind of a giant diffuser of retardant, fire retardant, and instantly snuff out.
It's funny you bring that up.
We're spending all of our time and money on research and development for ways to destroy each other rather than ways to save each other and our property from burning down.
Yeah.
And that is nonsensical. That's crazy. So again, not only do I not care about what famous rap stars think, or anybody else for that matter that's famous about the fires in LA, and I'm not blaming the mayor or anybody else for it because I don't know them and I don't know what's going on with their books. I'm blaming the human condition. We're allowing that to go on. And there are more of us than there are of them. And by the them, you know what I mean. They're the people that are building these weapons and continue to go down this psychopathic this road. So what gives? You know,
wait a
that's
minute.
what I wonder.
You don't want to get Ja Rule on the phone? Is that what I'm hearing? You don't
Get
want
him
me
on
to
the
get
phone because I'd like to find out just exactly what he is.
Find Ja Rule, get hold of this motherfucker so I can make sense of all this.
Oh, I love it. Dave Chappelle. Whatever happened to Dave Chappelle? Why isn't he on TV right now?
Wasn't he one of the players on In Living Color?
No.
With Jim Carrey? And no. That was the Wayans brothers. And
yeah, and Dave Chappelle had a TV show on Comedy Central for a few years, and I think he just kind of had a mental breakdown and just kind of had to unplug. And
I'll tell you what, with material like that, he's going to get canceled by the powers that be quickly, because they're going to say, what are you doing going out on stage saying don't worship famous people?
Yeah, right.
You're a famous person. You deserve to be worshipped. You should be worshipped. That's the game we play. We don't pay you to get up there and say, don't listen to me when tragedy strikes. This is how we sell things. This is how we warp the American population's mind, is by saying that, what is it again? Ja Rule?
Ja Rule, yes.
Ja Rule. So by basically telling them that you need to care about what Ja Rule thinks about any and everything that we tell you to care about what he thinks about. Okay? Not that he may think very much at all, and that's a total speculation, probably a mean thing to say, because I don't know the man or what he does with his time, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think you would appreciate it. I'm going to have to send you a link for the Dave Chappelle show.
Well, anyway, I was in the middle of saying I was wondering why we don't have some kind of something that's akin to a nuclear bomb or a neutron bomb that we can like put out a fire with rather than destroying a major city. And
you would think it would be possible.
Yeah. Well, that seemed to have caught your attention. You said you were thinking about something.
Oh, totally. Like, line. I think there's this idea that if we could take the neutrons and, completely obliterate life, why couldn't we take the neutrons and completely infuse the neutrons with water and create rain clouds? I mean, wouldn't that be a thought? And, I understand that there are actually technologies in place, but it takes a lot of resources just to make a simple cloud. And I want to say that they're doing that in Dubai. And, with Dubai, you can create, you've got enough money in that square footage that you can create rain clouds. And that's exactly what they do, is they go into the sky with airplanes and they create rain. And
it's called cloud seeding, and it's been going on since the 60s. They did it in North Vietnam, I should say. But of course, it was done for the purposes of an offensive against Charlie, against the enemy, because they were doing it to flood all of the rice crops in Southeast Asia against their enemies so that they would starve. That was why clouds were seeded in Vietnam by the military, but it had nothing to do with wanting to bring rain to areas of the world that hadn't seen it for a couple of years and were desperate to grow food. Fuck that. We're using it as a weapon. And that goes so parallel with the way that we all are supposed to fall in line and think, because we know who runs the show, because they have all the weapons, so they're running the show. They're all pointed at us if we're not saying or doing or acting the right way or saying the right things, and that's it. And so, hence my fear about, I guess, saying any of these things. But at the same time, I'm ready. I've lived a good life doing this game already, and it's, so much of it is just kind of a sham. You start to feel so hollow about so many of the experiences that you have. I mean, there's some real things in there. There's definitely some palpable moments, but so much of it is just acquiring all this stuff and piling it up. It's like George Carlin said about what a house is. It's just a pile of stuff with a cover on it. And then you get more stuff and you got to move and get a bigger cover, for all your stuff to be piled under. So, it's insanity to me. I mean, because I just literally think it's 2025. We're 25 years into the 21st century, and we've had the ability to annihilate the planet 10 times over again for about 8 decades now or more. We don't have the ability to jump on a wildfire that's outside of a major metropolitan area and get the thing snuffed out so we can all go to bed and nobody, loses their property or their livelihoods or their lives. Nope. No fucking way. That's impossible for us to figure out how to do. But when it comes to destroying a major city, man, we got that down. That's insane. We're nuts. If you don't think that alone says volumes about the direction that we, and sadly, yes, you, even though you didn't design the bombs and you weren't the one that signed the accords to say, it doesn't matter. You're a part of the equation. And so then again, we go back to kind of, why are you here? What value do you have? Or, what specifically did I write down? Does the world need this person? Well, if you're thinking that that's okay, then we might have a real good argument for why it doesn't. I mean, because I wonder, who in the world could think it's a good idea that we build more bombs and rockets red glare when we've got red glare all over Los Angeles, one of our biggest cities, and people are dying and losing their homes and their livelihoods. You ever had your home burn up, Michael? I haven't.
No.
I've, thank God, I've never had a house fire in my life and lost anything, but I've known some people that have. And think about it. All your life's going along. Everything is what it is right now. You got all your stuff, the stuff you've always had. You're safe. You're protected. Tomorrow, it's gone. And we know that could all happen, but we just aren't really able to deal with it because we don't want to come to terms with that until it might, or it does. But these people have, and it happens every year now. I mean, this is nothing unusual.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're a news director, and you've covered wildfire in our area, and wildfire is obviously not something that is new to our region. And it seems like a lot of people in this last wildfire season that we had, and it's an every year occurrence. I mean, it's just not a matter of if, but when we have another wildfire pop up in this area. It seems like a lot of people were really kind of suspect about the amount of government excess and expending and just the business that is wildfires anymore. Isn't that concerning?
Well, we had one here this last summer that started innocuously enough, like so many of them do, in a very remote area up on the side of a very
which is
long
natural
lake. It was not naturally caused.
Oh, it wasn't.
It was actually, no, it was not, but they were also very cryptic because there were reports of people seeing the person who was responsible for lighting it light it. But since then, it's been a point of contention because they basically said, well, it's under investigation. And I don't know that we ever got a cause on that fire that was here. But the big issue with it, whether it was naturally caused or not, and it could easily have just been naturally caused, was that it started burning about 12 or 15 miles away from an extremely remote community that's very small, that's at the head of this lake. And it, over the course of a month and a half, finally made its way to said community. And then they took all of these protective measures and were able to save the place from burning down. They wrapped it all in that, Logan's Run looking tinfoil shit that they do and protected all the structures and did all that. But a lot of people were up in arms. How in the hell did we allow it to get all the way up the lake until it actually, nobody... Why aren't we dropping borate on it? And that was because of rules that were pertaining to not wanting to get those substances in the lake and contaminate the lake. Anyway, listen, I'm not a scientist, okay? I don't work for Dow or for, Dulco or for, any of these major chemical companies and make all this shit that the military uses and all this. But I'm I can say with the greatest degree of assurity, regardless of that, I'm certain that the greatest minds on earth that right now are making the biggest money for continuing to devise ways to torture and kill people that are not on our side or with the program would be able to figure out something that would go boom in a way that would put out a fire quickly, just as much as it would start one. And like I said, destroy an entire city. That has to be something that is within our grasp. Why is it not coming to fruition? That doesn't make any sense. I don't believe that the mechanics of, just physics will allow a species that reaches sentient status to create something that will destroy themselves vastly easier than put out a small fire before it becomes large enough to destroy one of their major cities. I don't believe that.
Destroying something is easy, right? That's the easy part. And one of the things that was my takeaway from the cloud seeding segment that I was talking about was that it is very hard to produce rain. We look outside and we see a rainstorm come through, and Mother Nature's sheer ability to create clouds and the amount of water that it does in the way that it does is really amazing. And we don't have a way to necessarily create the same amount of water in a cloud that Mother Nature does naturally. And that's kind of part of that power too that you look at from nature and just go, that's amazing.
Well, rain, if I'm not mistaken about my atmospheric science lessons 101, rain comes from evaporation, pure and simple, and it happens largely due to the world's oceans, which are responsible for 90% or more of the world's rain or snowfall or precipitation. There are lake effect snows, like you've heard. Mountains that are very large, like Mount Rainier in our backyard, actually creates its own weather, but it's very vicinal. It's local. It's very localized weather. But many times when you drive by Mount Rainier, people will say, "Oh, it's not completely clear. Look, there's a little cloud at the top." That's because that's its weather, its local weather that it's creating from the evaporation that's happening off the glaciers and off of the snowfall that's at its crest. It's at its top.
But
it's so vast. It's such a large area.
But what I'm saying is that there's no way for humans to cause that to happen in an environment and say, this is where we want the rain to fall. And so that's what I'm saying. And from like the seeding perspective, it would be the equivalent would be like me pouring some water into this cup and then saying, oh, just a second, I'll be right back, running upstairs and throwing it out my front door and then coming back and doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And so the ability of a rain, of Mother Nature in the environment to create rain clouds, we don't even have that ability. I mean, we can kind of create snow, but that's different.
Yeah, but that's the we, remember, too. We don't have that ability, but do they possess that ability? Because there's been a lot of speculation about what the HARP array in the Great White North is all about. And one of the prevailing theories, aside from it being some kind of a set of subsonics or some kind of array that puts signals into the atmosphere for mind control or, those types of things, is that it absolutely could be used to control the weather, or that it's fucking with the ionosphere or something high enough up that eventually it trickles down and has trace effects on the weather. There are people that believe, that Hurricane Katrina, for example, was created by HARP array. And in fact, there was I want to say it was Hurricane Ivan, if I'm not mistaken, that went through Houston. There was a hurricane that hit Houston. It's been in the last decade. I wish I could remember. But I've seen some videos.
Was it like Harvey or something?
May have been Harvey, but I've seen some videos about this. It came on shore, and there are supposed to be some still images from satellites that basically display things that aren't naturally possible. That the hurricane came on shore, and of course, a hurricane is fed by water, warm water in particular. And so when a hurricane rushes on shore, the very first thing it does after slamming against the coastline is start to lose strength because, just like a tornado wants to be on flat ground, unless it's a very powerful one, a hurricane wants to be over water because it loses its fuel source as soon as it hits so it batters the coastline, and then of course it spawns small tornadoes or embedded thunderstorms or things once it goes over land. But generally speaking, the further inland it goes, the weaker it becomes, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's because it's lost its fuel source. And so these images were supposed to show the hurricane coming into Houston and doing what all hurricanes would do, which is spin clouds across and drop rain. And then there was a sudden burst of rainfall with these clouds that were developing in a really erratic and rapid way right over Houston. And they linked this to the downpours and the amount of flooding that happened, which they basically gauged as being improbable based on the amount of water content that the hurricane was packing and the amount of rain that it was naturally putting out. Anyway, they're out there. You can search them down on YouTube or maybe someplace they're at. But yeah, there are theories, again, that just because we aren't able to, as you say, seed clouds or do things like that they have had that technology for a while. And,
well, the HARP program was shut down. It actually,
was it?
Yeah, it was shut down in 2015, and it was a program that the University of Alaska Fairbanks went, and I think it was probably a government spending. They probably were not interested in funding it, and I guess it had, as of 2018 or 2008, it had incurred around $250 million of construction costs, and so it was a very costly program. But you're right.
Well, to my knowledge, they never came out and told us what it was really about or what it was for or what it was doing. And even if they did, do you trust what they say? No. Of course not. So who knows? I don't think they they probably spend all that money and build that stuff and will abandon it. But I wouldn't trust a thing that they said about that. Anyway, I just, my point is, if we can destroy a city with, one munition, then certainly we can figure out a way to put out a fire that might be getting out of control just the same. To me, it's where we're directing our energies, and it's about where we're directing, how we're spending our time and energy here. And you can't deny that 98% of it is going to be on weapons. It's going to be on figuring out new ways to destroy each other rather than figuring out new ways to save each other's lives and livelihoods.
Yeah, and I still go back to what I said before, which is destroying is the easy part. Creating, now that's a challenge.
Well, and especially protecting or insulating. Once something's built, it's done for. Mm-hmm. I mean, the clock literally starts ticking. Rome, the pyramids are still there, but they won't be forever. I mean, but literally once something is built, the clock starts ticking. It's going to come down. It's just a matter of time. That's the way the physical realm works. It's ephemeral. Everything goes away eventually. So you have to. That's why it's incumbent upon us to look at the things that are everlasting. It's that bind that equation. That's what Spirit, I think, calls on us to do constantly, is to try to balance, at the very least, our time in this weighted experience that, again, is transitory. It's ephemeral. It's not going to last, with the things that make this possible at all, and those things which will transcend it, which is the energy that constructs all of it, including the thing that we call you and me, and gives us spark and gives us life and gives us existence. Those things are not fully material, obviously. They're brought about by something else that makes the material realm possible. And so, to me, Spirit is asking you to do that. It's asking you to find at least a healthy balance for you personally, and then for the world around you, of, okay, there's an awareness of this. And so therefore, whenever I deal with something that is acutely physical, like I have to sign papers for, the bank, or something that's horribly just wired to this experience. And, like, because I'm telling you, God's talked to me about it before. There are no banks on the other side. They don't do that shit there. This is the only place where we mess around with that garbage.
There's no money either.
Yeah. So whenever you're dealing with something that is purely tangible, it's called upon for, okay, you need to deal with it, but remember where it's sourced from. Where's that coming from? And then the fact, of course, that it will not transcend this particular realm. It's done. But the things that made it so, and the things that move through it, like you and me, if we walk into a bank or the space that we call a bank, we transcend that. But the bank itself doesn't go with us. It's gone. The things, the bricks and stones that build it up, even all of the rules and all of the money and all of the ideologies that go with it, those don't transcend the experience. So balance, you keep it in mind. I would never want to be a banker, of course, but I would make a terrible loan officer, because that's how I'd look at prospective clients. And of course, all I'm supposed to pay attention to is numbers, money, and how do they pay their bills. But I'd look at it and say, so, Mr. Johnson, what do you think about when you pay your mortgage? What do you think about when you're mowing the yard? What do you think about when you're climbing on the roof to put a plastic Santa Claus up there?
What do you think about when you buy an oversized muffler for your truck and you jack it up that high? Well, what is it that goes through your thought? One of the things that I've been meaning to ask you, and I think this is a good time to kind of transition into that, which is one of the things that I think has been interesting to follow is the Artemis space program. And I think we spoke about it in a few episodes in the past. But, I think one of the things that space does to us as a society is that it forces us to really think of things in more absolutes than we're used to, or maybe even comfortable in. And that's one of the things that, kind of bringing it back to the coal rolling and where are we here on this marble, and why are we spending our time? And David Thoreau and his cabin on Walden pondering the meaning of life. I think that's what space does, is it causes us to start thinking about not just, our future and technology, but it also kind of starts really making us think more about our humanity.
Well, again, it's a balance, though, too, because while you want to think about the vastness of it all and the marble that, as you said, we are existing on, this speck, it's good to balance that with the fact that this is your primary responsibility right now. You have incarnated here, and so therefore you live, as we say, here. So this is your immediate responsibility, is your surroundings here. But you have to balance that with the constant, I won't even say reminder, because it should be constantly flowing through a person that it's all connected, so that while you're dealing with the immediate vicinity of your experience, your current experience, which is here, you're always connected to that which is vast and greater, seemingly, than you, although it's all of equal size and measure in some ways. It's just, so to me, it's not about necessarily, I guess realizing that everything is so much bigger, so much as it is once that happens, is to bring that into balance. Because I think people that are zealous philosophers or zealous theologians, they can get lost up in the firmament too. You can get lost in that, otherworldly experience. You can live your life. Like they have an old saying about the people who are in the zodiac sign Pisces, one foot in this world, one foot in the next. So, but I think that implies balance more than anything. But you don't want to fully go either way, because right now you're a human being. And are you capable of more, with or without a crystallized pineal gland? Sure. I mean, yeah, we're all capable of more. We're all these eternal sparks, because it's energy. Remember? I mean, an energy can't be created or destroyed. It's the first law in physics. And so it's the first law of spiritual energy. It can't be created or destroyed. So you have no beginning date and no end date, but it's the energy in you that doesn't have that. It's not the Michael Elliott identity, because it will come and go and have its time. Just like the Jack Hansen identity, it's just a thing that will come and go. And so is the vessel it occupies. So to me, the balance between the two realms is important rather than the immersion in both. Because if you get lost up in the firmament, it's just as easy to completely ignore everything that you might be able to do down here while you're here. But if you get lost down here and get attached to materialism and get attached to climbing illusory ladders and chasing zeros in a bank account that don't really mean anything because you're gone anyway, and that's what you make your legacy. I was thinking about this earlier today too. We're so big on two things, and they're dichotomous messages. One person on the street will tell you, hey man, live in the moment. You got to live in the moment. And then the next person will turn around and say, what do you want your legacy to be? Well, those are two completely different things. How can I work on a legacy and live in the moment? How can I live in the moment and work on building this legacy? You know, there's a kernel within both. To me, you exist is what you do. Because I'm thinking about, is it a waste of time to just march through this experience and not amass wealth and not leave your children with anything to inherit, or, physically, is it?
I think a legacy is a way for people to sell you insurance and investment portfolios.
But I know, thank you. But I'm hearing more and more about it these days. What do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah.
Well, it's like Elvis Presley had a legacy. Elvis Presley, for example, he's just had his birthday.
Yeah.
And my father hated Elvis Presley.
He was only going to be 90 years old.
Oh, can you imagine the king at 90?
Well, did you think that was interesting? I thought he was going to be like 120. I mean, at this point, Elvis has been dead for so long that when did he die? Did he die in the 70s?
70s, yeah.
Okay.
It was the late 70s.
But it just feels...
I want to say 78, 77.
And there's an example of somebody who his life has been larger than life forever. And I would have thought that maybe, he would have been 120 years old. 90 years old is how old he would have been if he would have lived.
Well, he might still be alive. There's the tabloids still pull that one out every so often.
And David Thoreau would ask, did he really live?
Well, see,
now
there you go.
Is the question.
That's what I would ask too, is by living in the moment or by leaving a legacy, which one is the Elvis? Which one do we look at to say that Elvis really lived? I mean, so I don't know, all things to think about. And again, as you know, these are the things that some might say I'm cursed to think about, but I feel like I'm blessed with thinking about them in that way. And thinking really isn't the right word.
What's your favorite Elvis song?
Oh, God. Blue Christmas.
Really?
It's kind of the one that popped to mind first. Yeah. I mean, I can't honestly say that I have a famous or a favorite Elvis song, but it's just, to me, that really just sort of typifies him, because it's just, yeah, it's kind of like, what is he saying? I don't know, but I'm supposed to like it, and I do. Right?
Yeah, no, that's great. I like that song.
Keep the revolver away from Elvis when the television is on. He was known to shoot TV sets in his house. He went through like 3 of them a day or something like that. It was ridiculous.
Oh, man.
This show ain't no good.
He was so before his time, if you think about it.
I don't know. Big E. That's a lot of, to me, that's a lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah.
We were just talking about that, I think, just the last podcast, of talking about money and fame. And it's interesting, after we did the last show.
And we never talk about money and fame on this podcast.
Yeah, but we did. We talked about like the dangers.
We talk about money and fame at every podcast.
Well, but not in that way. We talked about the pitfalls of money and fame specifically on the last episode. And then I went and watched this YouTube video, and I'm so out of the loop. I just...
Was it Genevieve's Playhouse?
No, it was some guy's video, the eight most notable things that were banned from YouTube, that were taken off of YouTube. And one of the most interesting one to me, I got the biggest kick out of it too. I have to say I laughed, was something called Elsa Gate, which we don't have to go into now. If listeners know what Elsa Gate was, just know, oh yeah, I'm not surprised Jack laughed his ass off at that one. I did. I thought that was just hilarious because it was, in a nutshell, it was YouTube was really taking off and it was a cash cow. And that was back when they actually monetized it in a very uniform way. And so it was all just based on racking up clicks, and the more clicks, the more money basically you got. And it was before they had any of their rules against what it was or
the algorithms,
how it was presented. Yeah, it was before they really came in and took it over. So a group of people, they don't know whether it was one person, couldn't have been, they thought, with all the content that was being made. It was probably a small group of people, probably overseas, even China, India, take your pick, got together and decided we're going to pump out all of these videos and we're going to use recognizable icons, superheroes like Spider-Man, Disney princesses, fictional icons. So kids, who were the primary users of YouTube, of course, when it first came out, would just blow up the clicks. But the problem was that the content was like severely unacceptable for those particular characters to be engaged in. I mean, the one that he showed was like Captain America with four of his superhero friends riding this giant hypodermic needle. I'm just thinking, just immediately going to like some safe park in the Netherlands going, don't worry, boys, Captain America's coming to save you with his inoculation of something else, some red, white, and blue going in your system. So
while the world lies bleeding and we all just close our eyes. So much confusion, the fight goes on. Every day we're losing and there's nowhere left to run.
I always like to listen to the intro just a little bit, just to give kind of the audience a little bit of a taste of, the song, because and I was just thinking to myself how formulaic 80s songs are.
You gotta have something predictable in your life.
Oh yeah, if they're not changing the algorithms, then they're changing how the sausage is made, folks. What are we listening to, by the way?
This fella's name is Jerome Matza. He used to head up a band called Angelica years ago, and now he's a solo artist, and he's a hell of a writer, got a great voice. I've written to him before and thanked him for sending some chills down my spine on the road late at night, as I will sometimes with these guys, these weirdos, these undergrounders that I like so much. But good stuff.
All right, let's send them with some chills, shall we?
Sounds good. Until the next time, chill out.
Well, it looks like Jack and Michael have finished up their latest chat about all things existence. But if anything they said got your own Existence Brewing, be sure and catch their other talks at existencebrewing.com and drop them an email to share your thoughts using contact@existencebrewing.com.
Existence Brewing.